Now, the book of Joel begins with such a poignant cry. Hear this, O elders, give ear, all inhabitants of the land. Has such a thing happened in the days of your ancestors? What the cutting locust left, the swarming locust has eaten. What the swarming locust has eaten has left, the hopping locust has eaten. And what the hopping locust has left, the destroying locust has eaten. Everything has been eaten. Everything is gone. There's a term called ecological grief. And this is the name, it's also called climate grief. This is the name for what is an anticipatory grief. An anticipatory grief for what may be lost in the coming decades due to humanity's exploitation of God's creation. From coral reefs and polar bears afar to our beautiful forests, our sequoias, and the agricultural system that supports this valley near at hand. The actions of a few powerful people, or maybe it's the economic system that is built upon endless growth, may take away much that is precious in this world. And I have often felt that grief in my times of studying environmental science or times going out into nature. From when I was in fourth grade, we had a week talking about the rainforest and how important that was. Or maybe I think about the forests of my youth that were chopped down to make way for houses. Or maybe it was visiting coal mines in high school or all of college studying environmental science. For those avid readers among us, you may get this reference. That in Lord of the Rings, there is a melancholy that is scored throughout it. The melancholy of the elves, these immortal creatures who have seen grand civilizations and beautiful nature wither in their long lives. And this is the thing that makes Lord of the Rings really an interesting book in our modern times. Because I'm sure many of you have grown up with this idea of progress. With each new generation, things are getting better. Our great-grandparents were in horse and buggy, and our grandparents are in cars, or so on. Actually, that would be my generation thinking anyway. But in Lord of the Rings, it doesn't work that way. Instead, it is the ancient civilizations that are grand. And in the ancient past, there was so much magic. The trees are more beautiful. The horses run faster in the ancient world. And as time has gone on, things have only gotten worse. Civilizations have decayed into shells of their former selves. Lifespans have shortened, and magic is disappearing from the world. I despair of this magic disappearing from our creation, from God's creation, getting a little bit duller with each passing day. How long, O Lord, until you make a home among us and renew us? This cry does not make sense without that underlying anxiety of abandonment that God's people felt. Joel writes, "Why should it be said among the peoples, where is their God? Lamentations ends with this heart-wrenching half sentence. Restore us to yourself, Lord, that we may return. Renew our days as of old, unless you have utterly rejected us and are angry with us beyond measure. And Psalm 22 cries, my God, why have you forsaken me? Do not be far from me. And for some of you, this is an understandable emotion that you have gone through in your lives. Other of you have not blessedly felt this. But this feeling of God's absence in times of tragedy, when the world feels unfair, or when we feel rudderless in a world that no longer makes sense, if this hollowness ever afflicts your heart, take solace in the knowledge that you stand in good company. So many of God's children in the past have felt this sense of abandonment. And thus in Revelation, we have the good news. God will make a home among us. In Joel, God will dwell with God's people. Such a big thing because of how these books were written in a time of disaster, in a time of feeling abandonment. In Joel, it is this famine, and in Revelations, it is this persecution. In times of absence comes a vision of light, that today's grief does not have the final word. What would it look like? What would it look like in your imaginations for heaven to descend? Would it descend as a city? Would it descend as a garden? Take a moment of introspection. Look within your heart and consider what what we could become. Picture our faint wooden pews becoming shining gemstones. Imagine a church door that never closes, so that all may eat from bread and wine that is overflowing, where we come with all of our hurt and pain, but leave each day rejoicing. Like many visions of relief, like we see in Joel and in Revelation, sometimes it's important just to let that feeling wash in like a wave, like a high tide coming up. Filling me with that warm relief, with that over-the-top imagery. And I pray that you might sit for a little bit in a sort of non-judgmental state, putting aside the scoffing at such visions of impossibility, but instead may see a vision of a heavenly Jerusalem descending as a defibrillator shock to reveal that the status quo will not last forever. The old order of things has passed away. God is making everything new. Rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given you rains of righteousness in its proper season. Why? How? How does God achieve this vision? Well, because God is sitting on the throne. In this Revelation dream, we are steeped with Old Testament temple theology about God's radical presence, especially in the temple, and particularly in some of these visions where it becomes so important after the exile, After the beautiful temple that Solomon had built was destroyed, we're going to build a new one. And so you will see so many visions being kind of echoed in this Revelation text, such as like the holy mountain of Isaiah 65, there will no longer be pain and tears will be wiped. Well, that's from Isaiah. Or God dwelling in Jerusalem, making a home there, like in Ezekiel 37 and Zechariah 2 and Isaiah 44 and a bunch of other places. This desire for God to be seen and felt in a particular place is powerful. It is powerful because God makes order out of chaos. What's chaos? Well, chaos is the pre-creation sea that we saw in Genesis 1:1, but in Revelation, the sea is gone. Not tamed, there is no more chaos. And so it is this idea of order in a chaotic world. It is the ability also, like really in a simple way, to attend the temple, to participate in the festivals and the rituals that gave your life meaning. We can all understand that nostalgia that really is just overpowering sometimes. In a chaotic world, you stick with something nostalgic. Like maybe for us, that would be Christmas carols. When things are crazy, at least we can sing carols that we know. We can eat warm cookies. We can sit in that joy of a holiday without having to think about anything else. That is the relief of the old order passing away. There is something new, and that new thing is what we had before, the temple. Yet, here God's sovereignty, God's presence among God's people is not passive. God doesn't just sit in the temple and not affect our daily lives. That's not how any Jewish or Christian would have interpreted this. No, God is active. God is intervening in history. And in Revelation, it is the unveiling of that action that is happening behind the scenes. And to quote Revelation 11:18, God is destroying those who destroy the earth. Or as Romans 8 says it, creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay. In this new world, I wonder what it will look like. Will there be room for copper mines and oil companies? Will God abide militaries that come and conquer other people's homes? Will there be a place for the coyote to find its rest, for the salmon to swim upriver? What will this new world look like? It's why we have these visions and revelations to shock us out of, well, what's possible to happen by tomorrow, but instead to think in more long-term of a big project, like building a temple that may take a generation to actually get done. Astonishingly, God does not conquer with the sword in Revelation. Nor is God a roaring lion. You may remember that image of a roaring lion in Revelation 4 and 5. That is what is heard. But when John looks up, he does not see a lion. He sees a slaughtered lamb. Now, this slaughtered lamb conquers. But he conquers through that nonviolent struggle and execution on the cross. It's a paradox. You mean you conquered by being conquered? You win by losing? If you've ever done nonviolent active resistance against or seen that in history, you will see how oftentimes you march and march until the government uses violence, and then you win. That is a pattern that repeated over and over again in the fall of the Soviet Union, those Eastern Bloc countries. Likewise, we are called to follow the slaughtered lamb to the cross, to witness to a joy of creation restored, even if that makes us unpopular. It is our witness, it is our voice, it is our imagination that is what is called for, not for us to bonk people over the head with what we think is right, enforcing them regardless, but to call them in to the witnesses. So, my siblings, come out of grief, come out of the old ways of thinking, for God will restore God's creation by sealing the beast of insatiable hunger. Come out and be God's people.